Billionaire flips the script. You know, these billionaires in Silicon Valley all used to support liberalism, kind of the democratic way. Well, that Overton window shifted, and all of a sudden now they're all starting to speak out about the truths that's kind of behind the narrative of the Democrat Party. Wait till you hear what David Friedberg said about the socialist movement in America and how California is just the start, and we're going to see more of things like Mamdani effect. Let's discuss that today. Also, we're going to talk about what Elon Musk said as a billionaire too. He says, after Charlie, I learned that there's not enough security to protect me, especially after all the things that we come out and say. He says, as someone who is getting into the political realm, he said, it's amazing how I was in business all my life doing business deals, but when I touched politics, my life became in risk. It's kind of crazy that we see people trying to do right on the political side end up being the ones that are in the most danger. We're going to discuss that and what the billionaires are saying, not because we love them and they're telling us everything that we know and they give us all the wisdom. No, but I think they can give some truths that we've missed out on for so long. Also, we're going to discuss several stories that happened just over the last 24 hours. Things that are eye-opening. But here's the thing. Because our news cycle is so quick and so prevalent, and all we do is get breaking, fraud, exposure, leak, we tend to just forget about it. How many times have we seen true records of all the problems and yet no one is arrested? Yet nothing happens. We move on to the next thing, and then we as conservatives tend to get more mad about it. We're going to discuss a few of those stories and how I think we've seen so much news so quick, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that we almost just get kind of just shallowed by the fraud and by the exposure and by the leaks and the criminality. And we're just like, well, that's just the way it is. It's politics. We're going to discuss that. And then lastly, we're going to talk about J.D. Vance. Did you know his home in Ohio was attacked? We're going to discuss who did it. And again, it should bring up the fact that the only people causing the problems in America and in the world is people with woke ideology in Islamic faith. Truth. Let's dive into these stories today. This video starts right now. Hey guys, welcome to our channel. Thank you so very much for being here. If you are new, please go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. That's okay, but let us know what you think about the content of today's video. Again, remember to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, whatever you like to follow. We share a lot of things that are breaking at the time, but also some of our farm. We want to show you our life. That way it helps you see we are trying our hardest to always live exactly what we talk about and what we preach here on this channel. Now let's jump into the stories of the day. First, let's talk about the situation with David Friedberg and also the All In Pod. That's become one of my favorite podcasts. Now you're talking about someone who looks at these four guys who are uber rich, either centimillionaires or billionaires, and I think if you would have asked them probably 20 years ago or 10 years ago, they would all say they're California liberals. They believe in free speech and freedoms. But to be honest with you, they may be fiscally conservative, but truthfully, they're all socially liberal. Not saying that that's changed, but because the Overton window has changed to where the Democrats have moved more of a socialist platform and a little bit more on a control element, I believe a lot of these billionaires, like tech billionaires, like Elon Musk and some of those, see this as not representing them anymore. Well, I love, again, watching the All In Pod and listening to it because, again, we gain wisdom from different things to focus on business and all. So one thing I've noticed, though, is they've become a little bit more political, especially since David Sachs is kind of part of the administration, and Chamath is a big friend of the administration. And I think one thing that I've loved the most, and again, you're talking to a regenerative farmer who believes in organics and non-GMO and true farming practices. Now, David Friedberg owns a company that does farming and is genetically modified. It's new innovations. So we're not the same when it comes to how our beliefs are. Actually, he's I think a vegetarian. So we have very different views. But he is probably becoming one of my favorites because of what he's saying about the Democrat Party. I want to just mention a few things of what he said because it's amazing that people like Trump and Elon and some of these guys are becoming more relevant and more in tune to what we see as normalcy as our politicians who are closer probably to our lifestyle and our salaries don't represent us at all. Just listen to this, because this is huge. Now, first, before we start off, I want to say this one thing. California just came out and stated, this is Gavin Newsom, he signed a bill in the state allowing for transfer of Bitcoin or cryptos on exchanges that has inactivity of over 3 years. So say, for instance, you're not using your money or making switches on those accounts, they now can assume ownership of those accounts. Now, that's exactly what we're talking about with the reset and the money. It's like, well, if the money is there and you're not using it, then it's like a subscription. We can pull it back. So California is starting that. Now, the reason I bring that up is because the focus on what David Friedberg is talking about is some of the laws that are being passed, like what they call the billionaire tax in California. So you see, Gavin Newsom is definitely going to be the forefront, or AOC or Mamdani, the forefront of this new socialist democratic push coming into 26 and 28. Now let's go to what Friedberg says. David Friedberg is telling people straight truth here. He says the real goal of all the socialist politics is not to tax the billionaires. It is not to come after their wealth. It's actually a case to go after the middle class. He said it's literally ableness to seize assets by lowering the bar every time they need more money. He said, here's the point. See, he said, people don't like billionaires because they're either jealous, covet them, or envy them, or to be honest with you, they think they're sleazy. He says, so what happens is everybody gets on this same bandwagon with the Democratic Party or with whomever's in charge, stating that we need to tax the billionaire class more. We need to put this percentage tax on them. Well, Ro Khanna has got behind it. Of course, California has gotten behind it. And they're going to assume doing this billionaire tax on all these billionaires in Silicon Valley and all in California, because that's one of the biggest places for billionaires. And because of all the problems that California has caused itself, where it used to be in surplus, now it's in complete deficit, they're needing more money. Well, here's what's happening. And Friedberg says this, David Sachs said this. What you're seeing is people are just going to move out. Billionaires have, undeniable wealth. So they're not going to stay in California just to pay it just for the heck of it. If they do, I mean, they don't, it's not the fact of the money principle. It's the fact that they're saying, well, we can just move to Texas or Florida or Tennessee and not pay these taxes, and actually have less tax probably to pay. So they're picking up businesses and move them. Tesla was one. A lot of the people in the All-In Pod and a lot of the people, their friends, are all moving to Austin and places in Texas and places in Florida. And he says what the truth is the only way they're going to pass a higher tax bracket and to make taxes hit people more is to call it a billionaire's tax. He said what's going to happen is as the billionaires move out, they still need the money. So they're going to use that law as leverage to go after the millionaires, then the middle class. He said because what we're going to see is there's not enough money to fund all the stuff that's going on with government in California. And so if they pass this bill, they're going to use it because it's going to be in law at that point, and all they're going to do is just lower the requirements on the money. He said it is exactly in the socialist playbook. Now, let's leave that for a second. Let's go to New York. Two things. I want to mention this from New York that should scare you to death. Now, if you remember me talking about how Zohran Mamdani was talking about how he doesn't believe in private ownership, he wants to abolish private ownership. And he says if rent controls are not controlled, meaning if someone's trying to inflate their price a little too much based on private market, he says the government, his city government, will step in and assume the property. Now, remember, California just said they'll assume the Bitcoin and crypto. Now you're seeing them overly taxed. Now you're seeing New York, a socialist state, that he wants to abolish private ownership of land. I want you to listen to what one of his people from his administration is saying right now. Listen, this is from Eric Doherty. It says, New Yorkers are shocked after footage goes viral of New York City's Zohran Mamdani's tenant director, meaning over the rent, over the housing part of the mayorship. It says, stating that white people will be heavily impacted after transitioning people and properties. And we're hoping to see a collective good in allowing for more people to have property. It's not about private property, it's about collectivism. Collectivism is a form of communism. It's just a cleaner way of saying it. You know how we like words, and so when words become dirty, we change it. You know, like in the religious facet, you had Calvinists, and everyone's like, ooh, well, let's don't call it that, let's call it Reformed. You know, and then you had like the Mormons are like, oh, don't call it Mormons, we're LDS. You know, we change wording to make it sound better. Well, that's exactly what's happening with the communism and socialism. They call it collectivism. They call it, the new democratic platform. All it is absolutely taking advantage of you. So now let's go back to what David Friedberg said. He said, what we've realized as a Democrat who used to be a liberal, now who's trending towards independence and Republican, he said, what they're doing is adding these taxes to put it into the tax bracket, to put it on the law, so therefore then they can utilize it for the benefit of themselves to taxing other parts of the middle class and upper middle class, the business owners and business makers, and also the people who work day in and day out for a 40-hour work week and payroll, bi-weekly payrolls. He said, you're going to see that. The W-4 workers, the W-2 workers are going to be affected even more than the billionaires because the billionaires are going to move out. They have the money to. He said, but what's happening is because that excess tax is going to make more people have less money, so then more people will be on the government's dole, which means more people will want socialism because they need the government's help when it comes to health, when it comes to housing, when it comes to food, and when it comes to the general welfare of themselves. What are we seeing with every Democratic leader in America? They're pushing for more Medicare for all, more welfare, more benefits from the government giving to the people, and also they're basically stating the government can handle everything for you. That's exactly what the Democrat playbook is. Gavin Newsom, Zohar Mamdani, and also AOC has said that. That is your front runners for the Democratic movement. Now, we're not even going to go to Minnesota and how the problems are there about the fraud and all that's going on. But Trump came out and stated that California's probably got worse fraud than Minnesota and that he was sending people over there. Now, to be honest with you, I don't care how much gets exposed. If no one's doing anything about the exposing and actually arresting people, then it serves no purpose. So that kind of leads me to the next point. From the billionaires stating the obvious and saying this is what's actually happening. They're not looking to go after the billionaires. They're looking to put it as a quote-unquote billionaire tax to ultimately go after you. They're not looking to go after the private ownership of all these big businesses, but he says what they're doing is trying to get, a little pressure on the business owners and the private rental companies to say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Government takes them over and becomes the biggest household provider in New York City. And again, far be it if you're a white person, you're going to get kicked out. You don't have the same rights in this collectivism look. That's what his director just stated. So we're seeing this happen in liberal America, but we're also starting to see this happen where people are believing the socialist narrative. Just like David Friedberg said, he says, what we're seeing is the more pressure inflation, interest, and taxation causes on people, the less they're wanting to take care of themselves, the more dependent they become on the government. And so now you're starting to see people wake up to that. Now the question is, I don't know if people are waking up quick enough. I don't know if people are saying, look, we need to take care of ourselves because we have all this government that's willing to give us all this free money. We might as well take it. That's what's so sad. And I believe Friedberg had a point. He said, we're going to be a socialist nation before long. Sadly, we don't want to be, we shouldn't want to be, but we're going to be because this is exactly the trend line we're on. We need more assistance and government's going to step in to hand it to us, and it's going to be in the form of everything you need. And guess what? Government sucks at running things. You think they're going to do any better the bigger they get. Something to think about. Now, let's move to the second part of this story, the fraud. I want to read a few headlines, and the reason I want to read these is because we know this is happening, and yet we're not doing anything about it. Listen to this. It blows my mind. Okay. Pfizer-linked GMO enzymes found in 90% of food is actually causing for health problems across Americans when it comes to health care. California, like we talked about, Gavin Newsom is wanting to seize Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies that has been active. So you can't just hold your money in your account anymore. He wants to seize it. Listen to this. This is unbelievable. This is from the rabbit hole. It says, the CIA literally confirmed that remote viewing is real and no one seems to care. It says it's amazing how we expose things like there is literally people listening and watching you all the time when it comes to your earbuds that just got patented with Apple, when it comes to CIA having access to your devices, and yet no one's doing anything about it. Another truth that just came out, Trump just came out with his White House and released that who is funding the Antifa protest. It is literally funded, $100 million laundered by the Democrats to the NGOs such as George Soros Open Society Foundation, the Arabelle Funding Networks, the Tides Funding Network, Neville Roy Singham and his network, a Switzerland billionaire and his network, and then Reid Hoffman, along with tons of foreign cash. Trump named them, says, I have the proof of it. Yet, nothing's been done. Then we see J6 yesterday. All the Democrats do a candlelight vigil. Now, the only person that passed was a Republican conservative. Life was taken by a Democrat policeman who was for D.C. And they're doing a vigil for the dangers of J6. And yet, everything has been debunked about that whole situation. Listen to this. Donald Trump comes out and states that the fraud is even worse in California. We're fixing to expose the truth. Again, if we don't expose truth and nothing happens, if we expose truth and nothing happens, what are we getting other than just more madness? See, this is the kind of stories that we're hearing on a daily basis. And because we're hearing all this fraud all the time, we hear what Doge is telling us with all the money that was spent, when we hear about all this excess of billions and trillions of dollars wasted, it almost just goes in one ear and out the other. You know, it's kind of like I tell you all the time, we're in a hurricane area in South Mississippi. So when hurricanes come, everybody, especially on the first one, everybody's like, y'all got to get ready, board up our stuff, get the gas, get the propane, get the extra bread and milk. And by the time the 10th one comes and nothing's happened, everybody's like, oh, he's just crying wolf, no big deal. Hurricane's not going to hit us. We're going to be fine. Let's just keep on going daily life. And all of a sudden it's the big one and takes us out. Ruins, just devastates half devastates half the neighborhoods in our areas. We're out of power for 2 weeks, kind of like what Katrina did. And then everybody's wondering why in the world they didn't prepare. Well, it's because we heard so many times that we should prepare, and then we weren't prepared when the real one came. We're in the same boat here. We hear all this and it feels like, well, the boy who cried wolf, because we're hearing all this exposure, all this billions, all these trillions wasted, and it almost just goes in one ear out the other. And instead of us actually doing anything about it, we seem to get mad about it. But we're like, oh, it's just normal fraud, normal politics, normal issues. And we can't do that. We can't get ourselves so encapsulated and so overwhelmed that we just push it off and put our head in the sand and act like, well, nothing's going to get done, so we're not going to worry about it anymore. No, we should hold our leaders to accountableness, where we should hold our leaders to be accountable, to make sure they're going after this waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm tired of these Congress and Senate going after the most frivolous things and never doing anything actually about the waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm tired of seeing, O'Keefe Media Group and Project Veritas and even Tulsi Gabbard and Nick Shirley and all these people are bringing out all these stories and all the dangers and all the exposures and all the fraud. Yet nobody does anything about it. I mean, even Trump just named 5 organizations that are funneling millions of your tax dollars into Antifa funding, and yet Pam Bondi still hasn't arrested anybody. I don't want us to get so bogged down in news so quick, so rapid, that we miss out on the fact that we really want accountability and we really want these people arrested. I don't want to hear just my leaders. I don't want to hear people say, well, it's just the way it is. It's just a bunch of fraud. No, I want to get rid of the fraud. There's got to be a time to get rid of the fraud, and it needs to be now. This is what I'm hoping. If anyone listens on the conservative Republican side, push the Senate Congress. Call your representatives. Not only that, make sure your voice is being heard, that you want change. Not just a little change, a lot of change. Again, this is why I say that the people on the right that's infighting, instead of infighting, let's all work together to make a difference. Not on our side, not to push against our side, but to actually go for the target. Like Dan Bongino came out and him and Matt Gaetz are in a war. And I'm like, what are we doing? These are supposedly both Trump supporters and they're going after each other. And so it doesn't make sense to me why we're missing out on the bigger picture is we're getting all this news sources, all this fraud, all this waste, and it's definitely it's on the Republicans have it too, but it's definitely more on the Democrat side, definitely more in the Democrat cities, definitely more in the liberal areas, and yet we're doing nothing about it. The last 2 stories I want to hit on this Elon Musk story, and then we're going to go to J.D. Vance's house. Elon Musk came out and stated this, says, after the situation with Charlie, he says, it's made it more impossible for me to be out in public. He said, there's a serious security issue. It's not just that I don't want to go out. He said, I just simply can't anymore. He says, Charlie's passing has reinforced the severity of our situation, where life is in hardcore mode for me. You make one mistake, you're dead. It only takes one mistake. And so when I look at that and I say, this man was always a multi-billionaire, has been the richest man in the world for a long time, and rode around with typical security, no big deal. And people would want his autograph and talk about how great he is, talk about Tesla, talk about SpaceX and the Boring Company. All of a sudden, he touched politics and says he wants to make a difference, do something good. And now his life is at risk. Why can we not want, or why don't we want, people who are successful to be in politics to fix it? You know, I remember, if you remember, I know this is a long time ago, but pre-2016, 2015, which is only 10 years ago, Trump was beloved by the left. He was on The View. I mean, Oprah Winfrey had him on. He was on movies. He was looked at as the star. He had all these shows, the most famous shows running on television. He was over the beauty pageants. He had so much acolyte, and so people loved him. Both sides. He was like just a treasure. And then he just dipped his toe into telling you that America should want safe borders. And now he's hated. And now his life is in danger. Charlie, again, we know the situation. James O'Keefe said, I guess I'm going to keep on being arrested and keep on being sued and always have my life at risk because, I'm just trying to make things better. We're seeing this more and more. And so what Elon Musk is saying is, look, because I chose to just say I want principled guidance in a better America, I'm looked upon as the bad guy. He says the left can change flags every month and represent another country, and for some reason we're okay with them rioting and marching the streets. Yet, the conservatives, the true conservatives, the true Republicans, the people who want better things for America are the ones that are getting persecuted against. Prime example, J.D. Vance. Now, love him or hate him, you can, what's your thoughts on him? Again, I think he spoke very good lately, and I like the fact that he's not just overly political. But I digress. I want you to listen to this. J.D. Vance is kept safe. He was in, I think, his VP home, but over the last few days, he actually had an attack on his property. It says, breaking, J.D. Vance's home attacker identified as a trans daughter of a Democrat donor's surgeon. The suspect accused of smashing windows at VP J.D. Vance's Ohio home has been identified as Julie LaFour, which was actually William, was his name. And the person that he was born to, the two parents, were two wealthy Democratic donors. This person, William, which I'm not going to go by the name that they're going by, is 26, was arrested and charged with multiple counts of allegedly to break into the Vance's home and to cause damage with a hammer. Now, I want you to think about this. What did we talk about? I never hear stories of the white Christian conservative who's a Baptist tearing down and burning down statues and rioting in the cities and causing major problems. Do you? Do you hear that any? I don't. Do you hear any openly devout Christian going and causing havoc for cities and towns and breaking into Barack Obama's home? No. Do you hear any even a Jewish family? Do you even hear that they're breaking in and causing problems? No. Do you hear even? Let's talk Sikhs and Hindus and Asians. You don't hear about that, do you? You don't hear those people groups causing problems. Two groups. And they're both on the left. And they're both openly coming together. Actually, Charlie Kirk warned of this just 2 days before he passed. Is that the woke mind virus, the woke ideology, is coalescing and growing towards the Muslim faith. And he said, not because they get along at all. He said, but they're using each other to build this powder keg to be able to do whatever they want and wreak havoc on America. Did we think that a Christian person was going to break into J.D. Vance's home? Do we think a Christian person is going to break into any Democrat's home? No. But the people that's at risk is like Elon Musk said. Elon Musk is not worried. When he was an open liberal and trying to do everything, getting away from oil and going straight for, solar and all this, when he was really loved by the left, he never worried about the right coming after him and trying to attack him. Never once. He didn't worry about his life being at risk. Now he said, I can't even go out in public because the left hates me that much. All because he was just trying to make America truly better and the spending better. Isn't that amazing? Guys, give me your thoughts on today's video. You know what? If you're an American, you're a conservative, and you're a Christian or have a conservative-leaning faith, or you believe in freedom and liberty, you could be at risk. You better be careful. And the more you speak out, if you're like me, the more you speak out, the more hate you're going to get. Be ready for it. Be vigilant. be strong. Be courageous is what the Bible tells us to be. Thank you for watching. God bless.